see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogs on how to build a culture of empathy and compassion. And I'm here today with Susan Partnow. We're going to talk about how we can promote empathy and compassion in the world. So thank you for joining me, Susan.
My pleasure.
So I wanted to kind of just get a little background about you, and I've kind of been looking through your website and other just material about you, and there's so much I don't know where to begin. It's like, so maybe you better kind of just tell me a little bit about yourself and all the things you're doing. I mean, it's amazing.
Well, thank you. Well, when you get to me my age, there's a long history, and I always say when I have a name tag, I need one that could just kind of have the fold out down, because it seems since I was a very young person, I've been very passionate about the need to create a world of safety and compassion. And perhaps that's because I was the youngest of three sisters, and I often did not experience that safety, even though there was a lot of love. So I live in Seattle. I work half-time as an organizational development and training consultant, so I get to put a lot of the things we're going to be talking about today into action in my work. I've been involved with the Compassionate Listening Project since its very beginning, when it was the Middle East Citizen Diplomacy Project, and I learned about it through one of my great teachers and mentors, Danon Perry, who is the founder of the Earth Stewards. And through working with him, I learned to be a warrior of the heart, to combine my social activism and desire and passion for that with my spirituality, which I've also found through my Jewish roots. Tikkun Olam is an important thread of repairing of the world. And through Danon, learned about citizen diplomacy and the power we have to change our world. So these are all the things I'm passionate about. And when Danon died, gosh, how many years ago now? 15, 20 years ago, I resolved to carry on his work, and that's when I founded Global Citizen Journey, which is designed to give people an experience that would really answer this question: how do we become compassionate? How do we feel our mutual responsibility and interdependence? And then I'm in my local community very involved with the Compassionate Seattle work that came out of the visit from the Dalai Lama and the Seeds of Compassion, because you can hear that it would be right in line with what I'm doing. And I'm very proud to be a founding board member of that, and following the campaign with Karen Armstrong's work of the Charter of Compassion. And so this question and the work you're doing is so alive for me. How really do we not just talk about being compassionate and empathetic, but really weave it into our own personal being as well as our communities?
So it's really, you're really wanting to combine the empathy and compassion with action, actually doing something. And I'm actually on your Facebook page here, and there's is that tied in with one of those projects? It looks like you're in Africa, or is that?
Oh, the big picture, yes, that's from Global Citizen Journey's first journey to the Niger Delta, where we built a library. And so that picture is one of the peak moments in my life of total joy. In fact, I was sitting at this very dining table where I am right now with my friends and colleagues from various places, dreaming up this project, and then there we were. I was made a chief, if you see my picture with a big headpiece, in this little village in a very remote place. And so what we dream up, we can really manifest. It was a very exciting time for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to zoom in, and it won't let me zoom in. I am showing it here, so it looks really good. I really want to see you with your headdress on, or your
well, if you look on my Facebook page photos, there'll be a photo album.
Okay. There. Okay, well, look there. So,
I know any African friend that I have, they get the biggest smile when they call it my big head, because that's a very important way that people honor special occasions there.
Well, some of the other things that you're doing is like you're doing mediation and conflict transformation work, so restorative justice, restorative circle work.
Yes.
Kind of you mentioned the compassionate listening, but then there's conversation cafes, which I imagine is kind of World Cafe style. Is that the same?
Well, let's see. In fact, it was in 2001 that Vicki Robin and I created this process and project called the Conversation Cafe, and it's a sister to World Cafe, and very good friends with Juanita Brown, who founded World Cafe. Unlike World Cafe, where you're in small groups of four and everybody mixes around, a Conversation Cafe is a little stronger, more intimate group of 6 to 8, and you stay with the same group the whole time. So it's paring down to the bare bones, what is dialogue, and you use a talking object, which is a really beautiful tool that I think brings out compassionate listening in people. Because if I'm holding whatever that object may be, everyone else is listening, there's no crosstalk, and I know, wow, I really better have something deeper to say because the quality of attention is so great. So you have 2 rounds with the talking object, then open conversation, and then a final round. And we set agreements of, see if I can remember all of them, of curiosity, suspending judgment, really listening deeply, aiming for discovery, and sharing airtime. So you make those agreements with the group. It's really a way to create, in the simplest, shortest way possible, a very safe environment. And I must say that every conversation cafe I've engaged in, I would say was a deep experience of compassion and connection and empathy cultivated in the circle of people. So that's a wonderful process.
And then finally, I have on a list here the Transpartisan Alliance. So that was something about bringing together different political groups into dialogue and communication.
Yes, thank you for doing all your homework and reminding me of all these things I'm part of. Yes, we have a group going here for a couple years now in Seattle, where we try to use kind of a conversation cafe process, and we're purposefully reaching out to engage people from all different aspects of the political, ideological spectrum to really deepen understanding. And it's been some of the hardest work I've ever done, because people show up with very passionate ideas and beliefs, and even though their intention is to build understanding, really the unconscious or perhaps conscious agenda is, well, if people really listen, then they'll see the truth, which is what I know. And so it easily can move into debate and trying to convince and persuade rather than to be curious, just to try to understand. But we're working away at it, trying to build a place where people can come and feel that safety and opportunity will arise.
Nice. So you're very eclectic. You're bringing together in so many different forms and structures and kind of trying them all out, putting them together. So that's really amazing for me. It's amazing, all the things that you're doing. And
well,
so
I think that it's, in a way, they're all the same thing, just in different forms. It's all the same yearning for deep understanding and connection, and they all are around conflict, because I think that's one of my passions and my belief. If we want to have a compassionate world, we need to know that means we embrace conflict. We're not going to get rid of it. A peaceful world is full of conflict because we're different, and we want to invite each person, each unique expression of us to show up fully. And so we're different. So conflict can we learn to not be afraid, but to see it as an invitation to move towards the conflict, as an exploration, like, wow, you're seeing that so differently. Tell me more about that. What is it you're seeing and experiencing that I'm not? And to me, that's all a form of empathy and compassion.
Yeah, so there's kind of like the underlying values of empathy and compassion. Then there's all these different structures that we can use to create environments for resolving conflicts and deepening connection, which kind of leads to, that's what these dialogues are about, is like, how do we build a culture of empathy and compassion? How do we raise the level of empathy and compassion within the larger society? And I like to kind of start the discussion around a metaphor. It's like a definition of empathy or compassion. And that empathy is often defined as the metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. And so I'm wondering if you have a metaphor of what empathy or compassion is like for you.
Yes, well, it definitely is related to that standing in their shoes at an energetic kind of level is important to me. And I'm curious to know your distinction between empathy and compassion. I think for me, I think of empathy is more from my head. I can imagine what you're thinking and I can understand how that might feel in my mind. With compassion, I'm willing to take it in and embody it and feel it a little more deeply. So I really am feeling with. I am experiencing as much as I can what you're experiencing at a real energy flow. And it's almost like channeling that energy. And in some work I've been doing a little bit in this last year, I've learned about things called the knowing field. And I think that's often what this is a tapping into, that there is this channel that's up there that is everything's part of, and quantum physics would certainly verify that, you know, the non-local simultaneity that's possible. So it's in that knowing field, and we could tap into it, but in our culture, certainly the way I was raised, that was never talked about. We don't have a language for it. It's sort of dismissed, woo-woo, not really given much credibility to. And yet at that intuitive level, we often have those experiences. And I've certainly had a number over the years now to trust, oh, it is there. So I think that it's opening the channel to feeling that, so that we're all interconnected, this interbeing, while at the same time we're each a differentiated manifestation of that being. And I think when we can go to the core and tap into that essential place, that's really that moment, that energy of compassion.
Well, there's I've done a lot of these dialogues and been looking at this theme for quite a while, and there's even among the academics, there's a lot of different use of these terms, so it gets a little confusing. Because there's one person I interviewed, Dan Batson, who's been studying this for like 30 years, and he kind of laid out 8 ways that the word empathy is used, and then so it is a little bit of, people are using the terminology a little differently and different definitions, and it does create a little bit of confusion between what people are talking about, and they're talking about different phenomenon. So
well, I hope what I've said fits within. I'm not academic about it at all, so I hope it fits in with the realm of what you're hearing. I'll be so curious to learn with you.
Well, I could, if I just real quickly, I can just lay out how I'm using the terms.
Okay, great.
So that can kind of help frame the discussion. For me, empathy is like a 4-part process. Like the first part is self-empathy, so it's mindfulness, sensory awareness of what's going on inside myself, and kind of the calmer I am, the more relaxed, more aware, kind of deeper I can kind of go, and the more I open up. And then as we kind of open up, we're more able through mirror neurons to actually mirror others' actions. So you can see my hands waving, I can see your head nodding, and that plays it in smiling, and I can feel that play out through mirror neurons in my own body. That it kind of, when we see an action and do an action, the same neurons kind of fire, so it's like a reflection in each other. The third part is what you're talking about, is the I call it imaginative empathy, or it's also called perspective taking, cognitive empathy, which is you create kind of a model of understanding where someone else is in more of a cognitive perspective approach, and that's kind of based on the notion of self-awareness, that we're separate beings that have different experiences. And then the fourth part is that when we kind of connect with someone, through mirror neurons and mirrored empathy, as well as through kind of that imaginative part, we kind of start seeing our common humanity, and that we kind of hold each other's humanity kind of like equal. in the sense that I'm aware of who you are and aware of me and how my actions will affect you. And then I want to naturally kind of act for your well-being. And that is kind of like a kind of a empathic action component. And so, and then just to finish it real quickly,
please.
That the last part is that, I hope I'm not getting too detailed here, but it's that the compassion part is that process applied to someone suffering. That when we see someone suffering, kind of the same process happens, but we're, is that how the empathy relates to suffering. So that's kind of the basic model that I use. And different people use it differently, and I think it'll really help if kind of explore these definitions. And
sure.
And for me, the metaphor, I like the metaphors, because for me, empathy is like a cornucopia, in that that there's like this richness that as I empathize, I kind of feel your feelings, you feel mine, and it's just this rich sharing of all these feelings and experiences and insights, and it's like a cornucopia. So that's why.
Interesting.
So,
well, I love what you're saying. I think for me, the part that I feel a need to add to that, and it's interesting because when I look at Goleman's work with mirror neurons, it's all very head oriented, which is fascinating and wonderful. But in my work, it's more heart focused, and so that's why I was talking more at this energetic, a more subtle realm. It's not cognitive, it's a felt in the body sense. And so that's the location kind of for me, more of compassion. So I'm really feeling with, and so sometimes it's with suffering, but I could also be compassionate with the joy, experiencing that. And so I guess for me, a metaphor, and I wish I could draw this for you, is I often start when I explain the model of the way I see some of these things, I start with this flower. So imagine this big flower. It sort of looks like a peony, but each petal is a heart. And at the center, all of those hearts are joined. Can you imagine?
Okay.
So to me, that is reality. We are all one. We are truly interconnected, interbeing. We're all children of stardust, all of life. We literally are truly one. The molecules I breathe are the molecules you breathe. But of course, we're also an individual entity. The way my liver is separate from the rest of me, and yet is it really? Because I'm not me without my liver or my heart. So the heart, the individual, is separate but still a part of it. And so when I really tap into this cornucopia of empathy and even more deeply of compassion, I'm back to feeling part of that whole beautiful blossom rather than this one petal, which especially in our Western world, we mistake and think that one petal, I'm drawing a heart, imagining that's me, as this completely separate entity. And then I feel alone and disconnected. And so it's getting back to kind of that connection, and that happens through empathy and compassion.
Yeah, so it's the deep connection and seeing the oneness of all of life and your connection to all beings and all of life and all existence and the whole universe, basically. Is that sense of I'm really like part of this. And and there's maybe you could describe what is the felt sensation when you're in that awareness. What is that? What does it feel like in your body?
Yeah. Well, definitely I feel my heart open, as opposed to what I call my stingy heart, when it kind of is closed and tight and I'm in my defensive place or my wounded place. So when I'm in that open-hearted place, I can take in that cornucopia you mentioned. So I feel open, I feel safe, I feel connection with joy and creativity and love and safety and all of those kinds of things. So where I feel that, so it's an openness, and definitely in the core of my body.
And didn't you had drawn a metaphor? Is that?
Right.
Is that
one of my favorite teaching tools? Can you see that? Okay, I call it truth box, and I've been developing this first based on something I learned again from Dane and Perry, but it sort of shows if I'm over here, let's see, I'm looking at it upside down. Okay, so I'm over here and something happens and I know how it feels to me, the impact on me. And here you are, the person who might have been the actor at that moment. But we're going to look at it very differently. So who knows what's the truth about it? But if we imagine, well, it's in that box. So if we thought it was this line, would you say that line is concave or convex?
For me, it's like a crescent moon. Is that the one you're meaning?
That's the one I'm meaning. So would you say, is it a concave or a convex line?
I'm not too good with those terms. I'm not sure what concave and convex means.
Concave is going out and convex is going in. You know, this is convex. So you can see it doesn't...
okay. It depends on who you're looking at from the perspective.
And if I was looking at it from here, it would be a line. So that helps me as a metaphor to know, well, what's the real truth about anything? It depends on how you look at it. So if I am trying to just understand you from over here, from my side, my perspective, I'm not going to really be able to be that... maybe I could be a little empathetic by trying to imagine what you're feeling like. But if I'm courageous and I'm willing to really step into your shoes and to look through your peephole and get your meaning to you, then I'm more able, standing from here, understand, literally standing under, looking through, and if I'm trying to not only get your perspective and empathize, but feel with you, what would that be like? What am I feeling? Then I'm really in that state of compassion, and I don't have to give up my own perspective, but I know, oh, if I were you, and those are all my filters. So we could think about, you know, what are those filters? It's our experiences, our education, what order, birth order, generation, profession, just so many things that make us see things differently. So for me, I use this a lot in all kinds of teaching. And then for myself, when I'm in a situation, can I courageously step into their shoes and try to imagine what it's like for them?
Yeah. So empathy is kind of like looking into a box through different peepholes, different angles.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we could say, you know, we all have very different perspectives. So if we're willing to truly listen respectfully, this is part of Transpartisan, you know, the left, the right, libertarian, conservative, that we all are looking at it from a different perspective. We all have a piece of the truth. If we would truly listen and try to understand from everyone, I think eventually we could reconstitute reality, or our best guess, in kind of a hologram and get the whole. Instead of trying to, you know, fight a war, it's concave, and I'll go for it because I'm sure. Yes, it is concave from the way I see it, and from the way you see it's convex. Doesn't make one less than the other, but let's step away now and notice, so what can we do given all of this? So I use that, I guess you could think of it as a metaphor to help.
Illustration.
Yeah, to enlarge my perspective, open my heart, get me away so much from judgment, which is what shuts it down.
Yeah, it's the judgment when we're just looking through the one box hole and saying this is the way it is, and then somebody says it's different, then we say try to shut them down, say no, it's not matching mine, and what we really need to do is kind of move over to the other holes and start looking. Take a little time to kind of look through that, and
what are they seeing that I'm not seeing, and can I open myself? And it's so interesting that it's really terrifying to us, it seems, to do that, to just let go. Doesn't mean I give it up, but could I just set it aside for a moment and be willing to understand your meaning to you? And I think there's something in us where we feel like I'm going to lose myself, I'm going to have to give something up just by trying to understand. And it is interesting in our work in the Middle East with the Compassionate Listening Project, where we believe listening compassionately is a gift we can bring to one another and can help create the possibility of transformation and change. because when people feel deeply heard and understood, it melts something. I think it does open their heart to that place we were talking about, where they can also, because if I feel compassion for you, I think we're connected, and there's like a conduit that's opened up. But it is interesting that people will sometimes then assume, if I've truly heard you and I understand and I feel compassion and I'm not judging, does that mean I agree? And that is not necessarily true. I may still have my own very different perspective. I may have feelings about what your behaviors are that are not, I need to hold you accountable to. So I think that's an interesting place to work in my work, to find we want the deep connection and understanding and yet still hold each other accountable.
Yeah, so it's like people looking through these different perspectives, these different holes, and then it's like, how do we get people, how do we move to see others' views? And somehow it's like, and everybody wants to be heard that, hey, this is my view, and they say, no, this is my view, come over and look at mine.
Yeah.
But then everyone wants their view to be seen as well. And,
right.
And if our view's not seen, then we feel maybe left out and not validated or something. So we have to find ways of everybody's view being seen and shared somehow.
Yes, and that of course brings me to the work that I'm doing now with restorative circles as a really great process where that can happen for a group, for a community in conflict.
Yes, do you want to go into that? These are so people are in conflict, all saying they got different views, and it's like the question is how are we going to, create that that situation where people can see each other's view? And
yeah, so restorative circles, ideally a group or a community will agree that they want to have a process when there is a conflict. So then when that event occurs, whatever that event was that we could say is the concave line represents, like there's a lack of fairness. I'm really upset when you did X, Y, Z. So we call the circle around that event, and we'd have the author, the receiver, and the most important community members who are more directly impacted, because we need everyone's perspective. So it would go through a phase where first everyone gets to be heard. What do you want known, and by whom, about how you are right now in relationship to that event. So
and the event in that case is that concave.
Yeah, we all get to come over and look at it through your peephole and understand the impact on you. And no one can deny how it felt to you, how it affected you. And it starts to build understanding, and we listen to everyone, and it's in a very structured dialogue way, because the way you've been heard is that it gets repeated back. So if there were 5 or 6 of us in the circle, I wouldn't just speak it to the circle. I would say, Edwin, I want you to know that when that happened, I felt so hurt, and etc. And then we'd ask you, Edwin, to say, well, what did you hear?
Yeah, that kind of confirms that you've been heard. So it's like more than just saying what it is that we're seeing. We're saying, we're looking through the peephole, and we're saying, this is what I saw. But we're kind of going even deeper, because we're saying this is how I felt about what I saw. So it's really people are sharing
how it's impacted,
how they actually feel inside about it, and then they get heard. They share that with someone else, and then you're wanting to know, am I really being heard? Am I really being heard? And then they reflect it back to you until, oh yeah, I've been heard. I feel like I've been heard.
That's it, exactly. Because it's interesting, in a recent circle, we didn't use reflection, and I realized by the end, I know I spoke, but I don't know if I was heard. Yeah, and the reason in a little diagram that the person's impact, it's outside. The inside the truth box is the shared experience, the events that that you could say what happened. But this is my internal personal experience inside of me, what the impact was, so I have to share that. So after everyone shares that, then we're ready to start to understand, well, and we might begin with the author of the event. What was it? What would you like known, and by whom, about what you were thinking at the moment you chose to act. So what were your intentions? Because those are also private. I know the story, you know, oh, that hurt me. That's my impact. So you must have meant to be mean and hurt me. Well, no, you may just have been clueless and had no idea how it was going to affect me. So then we get to hear everyone's intentions about what they were thinking at the moment they chose to act, whether it be to call the circle or did whatever the act was that the circle's around.
So the circle takes, I mean, we had this metaphor of just some event being in the middle of the box. And then, so in a conflict situation with restorative circles, some people have gotten in the conflict and there's been some kind of an event that's happened for the conflict. And so you're taking that event and putting it inside of the box.
Exactly.
Yes. And then we're all looking, and this is like a one process for conflict resolution and for creating more empathy and compassion. And so we're putting this event in there, and people are sharing what they saw, how they saw the event, and how they felt about the event. I mean, what was the, you know, somebody hit somebody, and how did they feel, you know, about being hit, or even how they felt about being hit.
Yeah.
And doing the hitting, they get to share how they felt when that happened. And then they're talking about their feelings as well as why they did what they did, how they acted.
What did you have in mind? Well, I was just so scared, or I was so angry, or I didn't know what else to do, how to get your attention. And so by then, our hearts get more softened and opened. You're creating the conditions, I think, for empathy and compassion. I had another little drawing here. These are supposed to be mushrooms. So we know in any community there's messy conflicts, many, many, many different things. But as a mushroom is one organism under the ground, it's all connected. So for this restorative circle process, we just choose one specific event, and that's what the circle gets called about. But you know, through dealing with that, you're really going to get to the underlying issues that are there present in all of those different events.
So there's many roads to the root. It's not just one road. You just it's important to get started somehow, and then the road will lead to the core issues.
And I think it's so important because many processes start with, well, tell us what happened. And you're spending all your time up here on the mushrooms. And that's exhausting. He said, she said, you know, and all the supposed facts and all the different concave, convex lines. And that's not what's going to get you to feeling that connection. So I think the restorative circle process is brilliant at helping you soon and quickly get down to the root causes and the sense of feeling heard and understood, and allowing compassion and empathy to arise through this humanizing of each other by really understanding. And then the process finally evolves to the third phase, which is, okay, now we get it. Now we understand it's not concave, it's not convex, it's both. And okay, so what are we going to do? What do we need to do to make things whole so we can move forward? So that's the last phase of a circle, is that action planning, and the group co-creates together a plan, and it includes a post-circle where you come back together, which is so important to assess, well, how are we doing? Did we get it? Can we celebrate? Or is there something we were missing and we need to do some more work?
So what's happening is you're coming down to the root of the problem. You're starting to connect around it, starting to understand. And then there's that component of, okay, what are we going to do now, folks? And there's kind of this action component. And that's actually what I call empathic action, is that people have kind of like, you know, worked down, they've connected, they've seen how each other, and it's like, what do we do now? How are we going to act? And then there's almost like this negotiation that takes place. Well, I know this will affect you this way, but how about we try this, and how about that, how about this? And there's almost this empathic kind of negotiation that takes place, and kind of a new relationship and dynamic gets created out of that process.
Yes, and so through this process, I mean, I didn't mention the very first part. First, somebody calls a circle, and then the facilitator is assigned, and they have a pre-circle with each party. And that's a place where directly the person gets some empathetic listening, compassionate listening, so they'll feel ready and safe to enter the circle. And then we describe the circle process. And all of the community members who are most directly impacted are there. So that is really important. And the word restorative is so key, because the purpose is not to fix blame and not to punish, but of course to hold people accountable, to repair, to make well, to be able to move forward in connection with one another. In fact, probably a deeper understanding and connection to restore the community in their wholeness. And that, I think, is so needed in our world, whereas our current justice system and the way conflict gets dealt with is it's just who's right, who's wrong, which means you're going to be in this battle, each looking at your own side of the truth box until somebody wins, aha, concave, or convex, punish the other, and nothing is restored. No one really feels heard or understood, just maybe vindictive, and it feeds that energy of victim and offender, of and wrong. And that's something in a lot of my work these days, especially in our compassionate listening work, we have come to focus a lot on what we call the rescue triangle. Are you familiar with that? The drama triangle?
I did see it, yeah, but maybe you could recount it, because I thought it was really, really interesting. The whole, I see it play out so often. So.
Oh my God, every day of our life. So let's see, I'm really into drawing today. I don't know.
That's good. I like the visuals. That really adds something to the dialogue here.
Oh,
so
good.
Really appreciate that.
Oh, good. Okay, well, you know, I'm usually a trainer, so I've got my flip chart. So that's what I'm used to doing. In fact, next time maybe I should stand up with a flip chart. But anyway,
okay. We could try that, yeah.
Oh, we could try that. So can you see that okay?
Yeah.
So here's the triangle.
It may be centered. I'm not quite seeing. There we go. Yeah, now I see it.
Okay, because when I hold it up, I can't see me on the screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it. It's victim, perpetrator,
and rescuer.
Rescuer, okay.
And I put the victim at the bottom because it's kind of everybody ends up feeling like the victim at some point. And I like to think of this as the not okay corral. Because in this triangle, nobody is okay. So clearly the victim feels like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I'm not okay. I'm not safe. But for me to feel like a victim, I immediately have to have a perpetrator. Somebody has to have done it, the bad guy. Okay? But as soon as if I make you the bad guy, how do you start to feel?
Yeah, I feel like the victim.
You feel like the victim.
I could already feel that when you were pointing your finger at me.
Pointing at you.
No,
so,
you.
It's you. So we immediately pull ourselves in, and it's like you're in a tug of war and you're stuck. You stay there. Now, some of us enter in as rescuer, but even rescuer has a subtle message of, well, you, victim, are really not okay without me. You need me to fix it for you. So nobody's really okay in this triangle. And as soon as we go in, it's enabling. And people often, and they're telling you their story, they're trying to recruit you to join in whatever position they are in, which is often the victim.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no room for, you don't even really feel compassion for a victim. You feel more sympathy. Oh,
yeah.
You pity. You poor thing. So the way out of it, we believe, is to see everyone, think of a circle as whole and complete. So you're not a victim. You could be the creator of your own life. And I trust you're going to find that way. And I will be perhaps a compassionate listener to you, a witness, just be with you, trust you, help hold you and see you in that way, so you will step up to finding your solutions. And a perpetrator, we believe an enemy is someone whose story you haven't heard. So if I really understand in that way, from your peephole back to the truth box, I'll see, oh, if I were in your shoes, perhaps I would have acted that way. So you still may have done things that are not acceptable and you need to be held accountable to, but I still can feel compassion. I can still see you as a whole and complete human capable of transformation and change, and not, this terrible, vicious enemy, awful person that we just want to cut out from the human race and disown. And I can learn that I don't need to rescue anyone. I trust, I respect you as well as myself to find your answer. So we can challenge each other instead of perpetrating on each other. We can coach each other, ask good, deepening questions. We don't have to rescue, and we can take charge of our life. So now I'm trying to remember how we first got into the triangle.
Well, we're looking at ways of creating, fostering empathy and compassion, and there's all these different kind of processes, the kind of tools, really, that kind of help us do that. And restorative circles is one tool. Yes. And kind of this vision of this model of the triangle model is kind of like another kind of a cognitive tool to help us to kind of orientate ourselves. And I did read the book, that you were a contributor to for the compassionate listening. And I saw this part, and it's still, I'm really still trying to totally get this part. And I wonder if you have like an anecdote or a story of how this is somehow played out. You know what I mean? To kind of be able to follow, like how, it's like, how are you holding that kind of that consciousness of, I guess it's just seeing everyone's common humanity and kind of holding everyone's humanity, and you're not kind of really sympathizing or demonizing anyone. You're just kind of, is that kind of, am I on track here?
How do we use the triangle?
With the triangle, I'm still trying to get it.
Just to notice when I'm in it. So, so even, okay, I can just think of a story with my husband. They happen all the time. And as soon as I'm annoyed or angry, if I'm making him wrong and I'm seeing him as the perpetrator, and somehow poor me, this was so unfair to me, then he's going to immediately start to feel like, what are you talking about? You're not appreciating me. And now he's making me the perpetrator, and we're just in this tug of war. So we are not able to find any solution or get out of it. We're stuck in the triangle. We're stuck in that story. And we're probably not feeling any compassion or empathy for either of us, and even for ourselves, because we don't really feel compassion when we're a victim. We feel helpless. Even when I'm in the victim role, it's more that pity. It's de-energizing.
Yeah.
So if I have the presence, which it's all what you were saying, and the way, I guess, that I'm just looking at my notes here, because you asked sort of my frame of how do we build compassion, and it does start from the inside out. So if I notice I'm triggered, and I have that awareness, and I can manage it and calm myself, I'll say, wow, I just got pulled into that triangle here. And I know that's not the way reality is. I'm going to respect myself and not feel like a victim. I'm going to respect my husband in this case and know he had a good reason. I don't know what it was, but I'm going to assume a good intention. Of course he did. So we need to find out and just try to understand more deeply what was it that was going on. So coming at it from that perspective of, I realized, I am feeling really puzzled and disturbed, and I really want to have understanding. Tell me what was going on. And I'm willing to set aside. That's the sticky part, especially I see with my partner. 'Cause if I finally screwed up my courage to raise an issue, I realized, I remember even once saying, wait a minute, this is my agenda. You're supposed to be listening to me. But if the person isn't able or ready to do that listening, the only thing we can do to build a compassionate world is to be courageous and be willing to be the first one to do the listening. And that is the really hard part. So if I am willing to truly listen and honor and hear and understand, then there's going to be a receptivity and a readiness to hear me. And I can only do that if I stop seeing that person, for example, as the perpetrator.
Okay.
That's how, for me, the triangle is really key.
So we can kind of take on these roles of perpetrator or victim or kind of helper to kind of help someone, or we can,
I think rescuer,
rescuer.
I
Oh yeah,
you,
try to. I'm going to help you. You know, you're being beat up, but it's like taking a different stance. It's like saying, "Oh, I'm here to listen to everyone." Kind of, and is that it? It's like you're taking the role of kind of being present and listening and saying, well, for me, I would say we need a culture of empathy. So I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here to kind of bring empathy and listening to everyone here, and then you're kind of needing some kind of a listening process and way of listening to each one instead of saying you're wrong or you're the victim. It's more like saying you need listening to, you need listening to, and you need listening to. There's some kind of a dynamic that's happened here where people aren't listening to each other anymore or seeing each other.
I always remember Dane and Perry used to say that conflict is a cry for intimacy. It's really a request to be heard, a need to be heard. So I do believe listening is almost always the very first most important process. Listening not from my side of the truth box to prove, because we often listen just long enough to say, nope, gotcha, you're wrong. That is not the kind of listening we're talking about. It's to truly listen from their perspective, to understand and get their meaning to them. And once we feel fully heard and understood, it's very disarming. We have our heart more open. We're capable now of some empathy and compassion. So maybe now I'll be willing to listen to you. So the hard part is to not get pulled into the triangle, because as soon as somebody starts to see you as the perpetrator, it's visceral, and I'm sure there's all those mirror neurons and everything else firing.
It's intimidating. I feel myself kind of crunching up, and it's like, oh, I'm ready to fight, you know? Yeah.
We spent a lot of time in our work. So for me, it's the 5 core practices of compassionate listening are the key. And so the first is to cultivate compassion for ourselves as well as others. So really that's sort of like that daily exercise of softening and being able to be in touch with my own core so I can find that in you is really key. And then to develop that fair witness, we call it. So that's that mindfulness. Do I notice, oh, I'm starting to feel like a victim here, or I'm really thinking you're a perpetrator. I need to stop that and notice and unpack what's going on for me, and from a place of more calm and equanimity to sort through what's mine, what do I really need to speak, and I may need to speak from the heart and let you know that's really not okay for me, and here's why. But I'm going to share the impact on me, which you'll be able to hear, rather than saying, you shouldn't, which is just going to shut you down. So cultivating compassion, developing the fair witness, respecting myself and others is really key. So that's all about this not being in that triangle. We're just talking.
So it's all starting with yourself, really becoming aware of what's going on. So it's a very visceral you have to really get kind of tuned into, am I feeling some tension? Am I feeling afraid? So there's some real kind of self-awareness and growth that needs to kind of happen in that. That's the self-empathy part of it, or or self-compassion, kind of the component where we're really, through sensory awareness, or mindfulness meditation, you can sit back and, just really focus and not be distracted. So.
You do. We have to be aware, attuned at all that. It's not just our thoughts, our emotions, physical and spiritual. Am I feeling connected with the world and hopeful, or alone and cut off? So all of that is essential, and so I can catch the earliest warning signs before I am hijacked by my amygdala, at the physiological level. Once you're into that fight, flight, or freeze, you're in trouble. You've lost it. So can I notice it before, it's like stepping on a landmine, before that trigger goes off, so I can manage it. So that's a lot of the work we do. We call it healing our world from the inside out. Mm-hmm. And I know when in all my social activism work, you know, I would just find, especially dealing with activists. I mean, I love them. I'm one. We were so passionate. But I realized they are the hardest to work with. They're not listening. They're totally in the triangle as victim at a collective level and making them all wrong. And that's a problem, see, because half of this country, the half that thinks differently than any one of us, because we are divided, can't be totally insane. I just don't think that's true. I do not get it. I don't understand their thinking, but they are seeing the world very differently. If we stay in that triangle where, you know, one is the victim and one is the perpetrator, we're locked in, we're stuck exactly where we are right now and getting nothing done, not being able to tap into wisdom and creative solving of problems. So this is really important work for all of us, individually in our own relations and collectively. It's all the same meme, you know, it's like a fractal. Mm-hmm. And that's why through all the work I've done, that's why I'm saying I do so many things, but it's all the same. Uh-huh. And I really see we can't do the collective work if we haven't done our personal work. So that compassionate listening is the fundamental for me for these practices. So let's see, I did cultivating compassion, which is like solar energy. It's a renewable resource. We really can cultivate it. And then the fair witness, respecting self and others. And that's been a challenge for me because I am a very extroverted, caring for others and the world person. So the self-care is always my challenge, to remember to do that. So I try to think of it as because I would say I'm a person without strong boundaries, because I really do feel that connection. But I'm learning to think as a cell has a membrane, a permeable membrane, and it allows everything that's healthy to flow through, in and out, but is wise enough to know some things are not healthy, and we close off and don't let those through. So that's respecting self, and I will respect you, that you are whole and complete and don't need me to fix you, but I can just be a loving witness, a companion to help you feel you're not alone, so you'll be safe enough to go and do the work you need to do. And then our last two practice, now that you've done all that, you're ready to listen from the heart. So not just from the head to the story, to the surface. Yeah, we listen for the facts, but underneath that, the feelings, and deeper, the qualities, the values that are your life force, that are really what's coming through, what's this really about. And then I need to be able to speak from my heart and speak my truth, because as we saw with the truth box, I may see things really differently, and that's important. It all has a piece of that whole.
Yeah, so I'm really getting the sense that it's really about empathy and compassion at the core, and there's all these different kind of modalities and ways to kind of bring that to the world, and the conflict resolve, and there's restorative circles, there's compassionate listening. You were talking about the politics a little bit, and that's maybe the transpartisan work you were doing. So it's really, how do we transform the whole world culture to support this these values?
Yes, to create the conditions, conditions that allow that beautiful part that I truly believe is inside each one of us, that essential core, that beautiful whole and complete part. But our structures and our ways of living and being together are so damaging that they make us shut down. We feel wounded. We feel defensive. We don't feel safe. And then we close off from each other, and in fact from ourselves. So I think that's my life's work. Passion is how to create the possibility, the structures, the conditions for us to open to what is always there.
Well, I don't know how much longer you have, but if you're talking about actually implementing this in Seattle there, where you've had some shootings,
Yes.
and maybe you could just share a little bit about how you're implementing all this into that terrible, painful situation there.
Yes, well, we're trying to and learning into it. So we have planned for Sunday, first 3 minutes of silence, we're calling it. And the idea being if the many of us can share this experience. So at noon on Sunday, we invite everyone in Seattle. And of course, even if you're not in Seattle, you could join us at noontime to spend 3 minutes in silence to feel this connection, this interconnection of all of us in our yearning for a world that is safe and that has healthy relationships and compassion and is thriving, and certainly our sadness and loss for the victims of this violence. And in a way we all are, because it ruptures the sense of safety we all have together. So starting at 11:45, we're going to be ringing bells. We've gotten some of the church towers in town to agree to all start ringing. People go out with their own little bells and chimes, and then at noontime have that silence. And there'll be some of the vigil places, some specific places. So from Compassionate Seattle Network, we will hold the space at Seattle Center, where we have this wonderful totem pole that was that arose out of another tragedy when John T. Williams, a native carver, had been shot a year or so ago. And then later that day at 4 o'clock at Seattle Center, we're calling the community to come together for dialogue. And we'll have a World Cafe that afternoon to allow each person to be heard. How are you impacted by all of this? And then to dream together, what would we imagine the compassionate Seattle we're yearning for, what would that look like? And then what are we ready to start to do to make that happen? So we see this as a beginning of a growing campaign to really put legs and arms and hands onto the idea of being a compassionate city. We've signed the Charter of Compassion, but until we live it, what does it mean? But Edwin, one of the sad things that I've come to see from this initiative is that a lot of the people in the south end of town, where there are many, many shootings, drive-bys all the time, usually often gang or drug related, but sometimes not, but sort of contained in a certain town. So that's been going on for years, really. But in this last month, there have been several where it's happening in different parts of town. And for what I'm hearing is a lot of pain and distrust from the south end of town, that it's like, oh, now finally people are responding because white people have been the victims, and it's up at that end of town. And so right now I'm really feeling the pain that for many, they're not feeling this as a call, but as kind of salt in their wounds. Really, I just feel so sad about this. So it just reminds me that there's a lot of work to do, and I look forward to finding ways to go to that community rather than trying to, they're saying, why are we calling everyone together, and when they've been trying to do things for a long time. So it's not easy.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was wondering about the obstacles. What are the obstacles? Because you're a real empathy, compassion activist out there, really putting yourself out there and kind of tirelessly working. I mean, I can't believe all the things I see out on the internet. That, oh, there's Susan again. There she is again. Another project she's doing. So it's kind of like, what are the obstacles? And it sounds like one is like, there's people out there who are saying, oh, great, you want to have empathy for, around this shooting. And we've been having that for a long time. We've been suffering. Where have you been, folks? Why now suddenly?
Yes. So this backlog of pain and the persistent feeling of isolation and disconnection, there's a lot of healing that needs to go on.
Yeah. I saw that here in Oakland. We had a shooting with Oscar Grant, who was African-American, was shot on our subway, BART and it was a white officer who did it. And so it really brought up a lot of conflict. There were demonstrations and, riots. And I was there kind of interviewing people saying, tell me about empathy, tell me about empathy. And there was some, people like you were talking about, they live in West Oakland, which is the poorer part of town. He says, well, why is it now suddenly there's this brouhaha? This is going on all the time. And you could just feel the alienation.
Yes.
And it's like, this is happening right now. Where is everybody? And it's very painful.
And people are so ready to go back to the complacent place of not having to deal with this.
Yeah.
And that, that is human nature too. We're addicted to novelty. As soon as something's background, we don't pay any attention to it. I don't know. I mean, the obstacles are many. I try not to get discouraged. I think all of it is ultimately based on fear and scarcity. When we get into our fear, which certainly it's much easier to not think about this violence and to think I am safe, but it's an illusion, because if there's one of us out there with a gun who's not balanced, then none of us is safe, because sure, it might usually happen in this one part. So we are all interconnected. I do think it's a spiritual question, and once we finally get that, then we can break through that. But it's definitely our fears and our sense of scarcity. I think scarcity, not only at the material level, but even of being seen and heard, scarcity of bandwidth, of attention, that are really the obstacles. And I guess in terms of overcoming it, I think compassion is a key path, self-compassion, so we don't go into hopelessness and despair or cave into our fear and sense of scarcity, but keep hope alive. Keep hope alive and imagine the possibility and fill our spirits so we aren't depleted. And I think through connection with one another where we feel that joy, and I think, coming back to where we started, talking a little bit about my work in Africa, one of the gifts of working in West Africa was that, like in the last 2 years, I've been in Liberia, which is, I think, the second poorest country on earth. They have like 80% unemployment. It's just so much suffering, and yet the people are not. There's in some ways less suffering than here at a spiritual or psychic level. There's a lot of physical suffering, tremendous, hunger and hard, stressful days, just everything's so hard there. But people sing every day. They don't have homelessness, because even though they have nothing, they always take you in. So there's that capacity for compassion and connection. So it's just such an interesting thing to look at and sense into and hear, where we're so seduced by our material. We have a great price sometimes, I think, that we pay there. And we're afraid to open ourselves up in this compassionate way, because then what will that do to me and my stuff? And I do notice that when there is so much suffering in people who have less, and if we open our hearts, how do we live with this injustice that is getting greater and greater in our world?
Well, it sounds like you're really working hard to address all those questions, and kind of putting yourself out there and kind of tirelessly working on these questions. I think it's an ongoing kind of a process, and these dialogues are part of that, just to share with people who are working on this path, and then also have panel discussions and kind of create a bit of a online engine for keeping this going, and knowing that, hey, you're not alone, that you want this world, this type of world. And I think you're really blazing a pathway too, with all your work. And
well, I'm trying to learn and grow, and I guess the last metaphor I'll leave with is just seeing kind of that infinity sign, working on the inside, working on myself. What am I learning? Bringing it to the outside. And I think that's what we all need to be doing. It's the inner work that then is manifested in the outer work. And it's the journey. It's just the learning and the growing. And to me, it's the most important thing for all of us, for the sake of our human lives and of our beautiful earth. And we didn't talk about that, but it all shows up in how we're impacting our environment and the four-leggeds and all life.
Well, I hope we can continue these dialogues. That this is just the beginning, and I just enjoyed talking to you.
Thank
so
you.
Look forward to kind of keeping the dialogue going.
Yes.
So.
Thank you for all you're doing, Edwin. This is just so beautiful to know there's a channel for empathy and compassion.
The empathy channel.
That's wonderful. Thanks for all you're doing.
Okay. Thank you so much again. Bye.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.